my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing Python data automation. So first of all, we're going to open VS Code and we're going to open import OS, and just for good practices, we're going to create a function to actually rename our files in the file directory. And we're going to create the function, and this function is actually going to take in two parameters, which is going to be the directory and the prefix. We're also going to be using a for loop to actually list the directory where our data is saved. So the next thing we're going to do is actually use our for loop. Now, what this for loop would do is list the file names in our directory using the OS we had initially imported, and then we can then create a variable and which will take in both the prefix, and we're going to call that variable new file name, which will take in the prefix. And we want to also create something like a space between the file name and the prefix that we're going to name it, and we're going to concatenate that with our file name. So basically the file name that was initially that actually came with the data. And then the next step we're going to do is create a join method. Basically what this method will do is take in the directory and the file name, and we're going to be storing it in a variable called the source. And then the next method we're going to create, so now we're going to create another method, but this time we're creating the rename method for the new file name. So we're going to be having the os.path.join, and it's going to take in two parameters, which is the directory and the new file name. Now we have all our variables. We're going to be using the rename method using the os.rename, and that is going to take in the two variables, which is the source variable and the rename as parameters. Just for good practices, we are going to be using a command. So we're going to be saying use the function to rename the file in the file directory. So now we can call in our function, which is the rename files function. So basically what this function can do is it will take in the directory, which is where our data is originally stored in. For the purpose of this tutorial, it's stored on my desktop. Not the best practices, but it's actually stored there. So we're just going to copy that URL, and then we're going to paste it in. And also we also want to give it the second parameter, which is the prefix, and we're going to be using face recognition for, and that's the prefix that I want to append the naming file to the file stored in the directory. We have our function ready. The next step for us to do is to actually run the script. So we're going to be using Python rename _files .py. And as you can see, I did get an error because when I initially did the for loop, I forgot to add a colon. So I'm just going to correct that, and also correct the indentation as well. And then going to try and rerun the command line using the same command prompt, which is the Python rename _files.py. And the reason I'm using that, it's because that's the name I actually saved it with. So whatever you decide to name your Python script file name, that is actually what you would use to run your code. So now we're just going to go back to our file directory and check and to see if what the output was. So you can see that the name of the prefix